Hey guys, I'm going to summarize Chapter 8, Avoidance, out of Murray Sidman's Coercion and its Fallout. So this chapter is pretty much just talking about what avoidance is, how it's similar to escape. They're both side effects of positive reinforcement and punishment, those coercive things. And he kind of talks about also what causes avoidance and what doesn't cause avoidance. So the difference between escape and avoidance is that escape involves the aversive event or stimulus, shock, actually happening to you, and then you get away from it, you escape it. But for avoidance, that means we prevent that shock punisher from happening because our past and our present experiences have taught us that if we don't behave in a certain way, press the lever, then we will get that shocker punisher. So in the lab with the rat, this warning light comes on, and the rat has learned that if the light stays on for 5 seconds, it will get a shock administered to it. He's also learned that if he presses a lever when the light comes on, then he won't get the shock, and a certain amount of time passes, or intermittent amount of time passes before the light will come on again, and the shock will stay away. So he avoided the punisher of the shock. And Sidman talks about while these avoidance behaviors can seem really adaptive, and they can be sometimes for our physical environment, just surviving in the world, too many things, especially other people in our relationships, our teachers, our bosses, what have you, are becoming like those warning lights in the rat's cage, signaling the need for others to avoid them. So, if I want to be happy and successful in the world, then I'd rather not spend much of my time actively avoiding events or people. So he next discusses the causes for avoidance. Let me find my spot. Okay, and also some myths or some explanatory type fictions that we use regarding avoidance. So the first cause, he says, lies in the past, and this we know already. So we learn from consequences, and that directly influences our present behavior, making certain behaviors less likely or more likely, depending on reinforcement or punishment. And the next cause of avoidance lies in the present. So, this we know as well. So I have a carrot. So I've learned that if I'm home and my husband's here, and I ask for a carrot once and he gets me a carrot, ask him for the carrot, produced a carrot, that was my past consequences. So I'm going to do it again. But I also have learned that, first of all, I need to be hungry. I need that MO of being hungry. I also need him to be home. I need to be home. And I need to have carrots in the house. Otherwise, asking him for a carrot's not going to produce a carrot. So, those are the things that influence our behavior. And he mentions that our avoidance behaviors are not influenced by the future, which is kind of hard to wrap your head around because it seems like such a useful tool we have for managing long-term behaviors and avoiding things that aren't good for us. But he insists that the future cannot control our conduct. We learn from experiences the best, except for the occasional rule-governed behavior. That can play a part, but he brings up the example of the kid learning. He can learn not to cross the road when there's cars in it, or not to stay on the road. From rules, the parents saying, don't do that, or you'll get killed. But he may just be more following those social contingencies for that person, just trying to go by what they say. Then he just has an experience. He can't go out into the street and be killed and learn from it. So we do have that rule governed behavior. I myself, I've been run over by a car. So I try very hard not to jump out of cars anymore, or to, I look several times before I cross the road. So he then discusses a few myths. What does not cause avoidance? Like I said, the future, that cannot influence our present behavior, our conduct. So he talks about expectancies, and I don't think I'm going to explain this really great. I think I understand it, but if anyone has a good way to put it, or they have questions or want to talk about it, please do. But it's an inner thing. So, so we may say that we're doing something now, we're avoiding something to reduce our expectancy of it happening in the future. That's what he pretty much says. He says this is just something we say, it's just, it doesn't really mean much, and we can't measure our inner expectancies. And they themselves are not what cause avoidance behaviors. So previous experience with the Punisher causes those expectancies, and it also causes our present avoidance behaviors. And the second one, which is I think a lot of us use, I use myself, is anxiety, fear and anxiety. That's why I avoid. So you say, I'm not going to the shopping mall because I'm anxious, because I have anxiety. Um, so we forget that anxiety does have physical causes often, and it may not seem that way or might not feel that way. Especially if you're just sitting there, like I myself would just get palpitations or, just weird physiological symptoms. And so, some of us might not we might feel that it causes us to act certain ways. Sometimes I think a little part of it may. But um, it's generally not something that just came out of nowhere. There's been a lot of factors that have happened to you before to make you an anxious person, more or less. So let's see. Oh, and sorry about that. I have in here, I mentioned that, from all the bad things happening, there's good things, but from all the bad things happening in our country and in the world, and these things that are constantly thrown at us and the vision we have, sometimes I'm like, to not be an anxious person may be more abnormal. I think all these things going on, everyone should be anxious, or they're maybe just ignoring reality if they're not. So that's something to keep in mind. And I also, talking about that, sometimes I was thinking, I had nightmares the other night, and I have nightmares when I'm stressed out, and I dream that people are breaking into the home, into my house, and they're breaking into the bedroom. And I first thought, well, reading this chapter, I thought, well, when I woke up, I wanted to buy a security system for the house. I wanted to get alarms for the doors. But I thought, well, what's making me feel that way? I have no experience with anyone ever breaking in. I live in a safe neighborhood. I feel safe. I would tell anyone that. But after these dreams, I don't. But I think it was Skinner who said dreams are still experiences. They're still behaviors. They're thoughts in your head. And in a way, your dreams often, you are experiencing physiological symptoms that would be similar to actual experiences. So I don't know if you guys have those experiences as well. Like I had a dream that Bengal tigers broke into the house and I had to fight them. And I don't know where that came from. I don't think I fear Bengal tigers. I mean, I do, but and I have an experience with that. But yeah, so that's, I don't know if you guys mentioned if you guys have that similar experience. But anyway, one last thing that he does mention is that oftentimes avoidance behaviors, they don't seem to have a reason. If you see someone doing something, avoiding, it may seem weird. So, for an example, if we walk into that lab with the rat and you see him pressing that lever all the time, and you don't see the shock because he's preventing the shock. Well, you're just seeing this rat pressing this lever for no reason, and you're not seeing his past experiences, and you're not seeing what he is avoiding in the present by pressing the lever. And the same with the bully example. All you see is this little kid taking 2 mile long way home from school when he could be taking this very short route. And you think, oh, this kid is just loony. But what you don't see is that this kid is avoiding a bully every single time he does this. So because of this relation, and its relation to coercion, the cause for avoidance is not always apparent. So as behavior analysts, we must remember that we need to look closely and we need to analyze Especially we have clients, we need to analyze past experiences, we need to analyze present situations. And yes, so for a discussion question, think of something or someone that you often avoid. And after reading this chapter, what do you think has caused you to avoid that person or that thing or event? What might make you avoid that thing or person less? So thank you guys. Here's my reference. Of course, let me know if you have any questions or thoughts.